As we continue to talk about music, we were talking about having it written down and not just auditory but visual, because that has to happen if you don't have a specific teacher right in front of you. So we were talking about these things were written down and they were called notes. And we gave an example of a piano keyboard that most people know about. Now, of course, every instrument, whether it's a piano or whatever, has notes on it that can be played. It's just a different way to do it. Like a violin, you have a bow and you have strings here. You do it this way. A piano, you have notes in front of you. You do it this way. A trombone, you put it here and you have this here and you do this and this and this. Every instrument has notes. It's just constructed differently, and it does sound differently as well. But they all have notes, and they're all written down. Otherwise, the people playing wouldn't know what to play because they're not doing it auditorily, they're doing it visually. They're seeing it on a piece of paper. Now, one thing about notes, and here you go with a cultural difference. In the Western world, in general, notes have certain distances between them. Those are called intervals. Mathematically, they are shown very well, but we won't go into that now. But the intervals between notes, how far one note is from the other sound wise, is what makes the kind of music we listen to normally. Now, in the Western world, there is a certain distance between these notes, intervals, a certain amount of interval between notes. In the Eastern world, there is a much smaller distance between notes, smaller intervals. So, for example, on the piano keyboard, if we touch C and then D, that's an interval. But if it's Eastern music, if you touch C, you wouldn't go to D for a while because you've got all these smaller intervals in between C and D. Therefore, Eastern music has very, very fine, tiny differences between some notes. And there are reasons they have that. And there are reasons Western music has what it has for notes as well. So those are two of the main differences between Eastern and Western music as far as what is written down so it's visible to the person who wants to know what they're doing. Now, the other thing about this is how are notes put together? Are they just separate? So you play them one after the other? On the keyboard, for example, if you're on the piano, you play this note, this note, this note, this note, this note. You can play them up the scale this way, or you can play them down the scale this way if you choose. Either one. But here's what's interesting. There came a time in music where one didn't just play single notes up and down or spaces between them, let's say. There came to be a time when notes were put together at the same time, so you didn't just hear one note, you heard two notes at the very same time. Now, when you do that, for example, in music, that is called a chord. A chord is two notes of music sounding at the same time. If you have one note of music sounding, that's not a chord. That's just a note. So a chord is more than one note sounding at the same time as the other note. Now, we will get into this a little bit later because in music history, this becomes a very important factor because the first kinds of things that happened in music were the idea of sounding more than one note together, or just perhaps two notes together. This is a very special thing that was done, and that made a big difference in the way music evolved from just one note to more than one note at a time. This itself is the beginning of the evolution of Western music.